Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. President Trump says U.S. strikes have destroyed 80% of Iran's missile sites and crippled its drone and naval forces. A new video shows strikes on Iranian missile launchers.
President Trump warning the Iranian regime if they block the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. will strike even harder. Plus, how the war is affecting the world's oil supply.
New York City's mayor and police commissioner say an attack near Gracie Mansion Saturday is being treated as an act of terrorism. 2 individuals in custody are facing federal charges.
And President Trump is ramping up pressure to enforce voter ID, vowing to stall any bills from becoming law until it's approved by Congress.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today's Tuesday, March 10th. In today's top news, we'll look at updates from the war in Iran. President Trump discussing what led the U.S. to launch preemptive strikes on Iran, plus his views on the newly selected Iranian leader.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus new videos of military action from CENTCOM.
President Trump says he acted based upon information and belief that Iran would have taken over the Middle East if he hadn't acted.
But they were going to hit them. If I didn't hit them first, they were going to hit our allies first.
Trump says Operation Midnight Hammer last year, targeting Iran's nuclear program, prevented what he called a major catastrophe.
You know, if we didn't do that B-2 attack, Israel would have been wiped out. They would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks after that.
Trump also said Iran rejected a U.S. offer of unlimited free nuclear power for civilian use. He says the regime continued pursuing nuclear capabilities after the strikes at levels the U.S. considered unacceptable. Speaking to House Republicans in Florida, Trump also gave an update on military action in Iran.
Iran's drone and missile capability is being utterly demolished. The Navy is gone. It's all lying at the bottom of the ocean. 46 ships. Can you believe it?
The president saying Iran now has only about 20% of its missile launch capability remaining.
They had all of those missile sites and all those launchers that we got rid of, about 80% of them right now, by the way. Got rid of most of the, it's died down to a trickle.
Trump also responded to a question on whether Iran's newly chosen leader has a target on his back.
I don't want to say whether or not he does, because that would be inappropriate.
With 7 U.S. service members now confirmed dead in combat, Trump was asked how many casualties were acceptable.
Well, as I said before, when you have conflicts like this, you always have death. And I was at Dover yesterday. I met the parents, and they were unbelievable people. They were unbelievable people, but they all had one thing in common. They said to me one thing, every single one: finish the job, sir. Please finish the job.
The body of the 7th U.S. service member who died in combat during the Iran war was flown back to the U.S. yesterday. Army Sergeant Benjamin N. Pennington of Glendale died Sunday after being wounded during a March 1st attack on the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Pennington joined the Army straight out of high school. A U.S. Army carry team transferred his body from a military plane during a dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Vice President J.D. Vance, War Secretary Pete Hegseth, General Dan Caine, and others attended the dignified transfer. Meanwhile, U.S. Central Command released a new video showing 3 strikes on Iranian missile launchers. A caption with the video reads, "The Iranian regime can try to hide their missile launchers, but U.S. forces won't stop looking. When we find them, we're taking them out." Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And thanks to Daniel for that report. And joining us now with analysis on the Iran war is Dr. Dan Diker. He's president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thanks for joining us this morning, Dan. What is the sentiment on the ground in Israel right now?
Good to see you, Carrie, from Jerusalem, Israel's eternal capital. The sentiment in Israel is one of resilience, determination, and focus to back Prime Minister Netanyahu and the great Israel Defense Forces together with our extraordinary ally, the United States, in ending the 47-year rule of the world's most dangerous regime seeking the world's most dangerous weapons. And I think that Israelis are very resilient We've been absorbing scores of missiles guided by laser from Tehran and rockets from Iran's Hezbollah proxy from Lebanon. But the public altogether is absolutely supportive of the prime minister and the Israel Defense Forces in what is, this is the Normandy beach of our time. We are fighting the Nazi regime of our time. It is really a great credit to President Trump. I think the world owes him a great debt of gratitude for the type of strategic clarity the president has in working with Prime Minister Netanyahu in ending this horrific regime that has taken the lives of 50,000 of its own people, wounded 500,000, and is determined to use nuclear weapons against the United States and against Israel. And as the president said last night, Carrie, as you folks played in the opening of the segment, it was the Iranian regime itself that said that they were within weeks of having a nuclear device.
You were just sharing that you felt that the appointment of Khamenei's son was more of a signal, if you will, that the regime is trying to put on that they're still strong and able to maintain and outlast this operation against them. Where are we, would you say, at this moment with the joint effort between the U.S. and Israel in removing the regime?
Carrie, thanks for that question. Absolutely. First of all, we are in the West facing jihad. And jihad's mandate is to always assume that they're winning until the last man standing. That means you may find this difficult to believe, but the Iranian regime still believes that it's winning, even though its air force has been decimated. 50 ships, 50 naval ships have been decimated by the United States military. Most of its senior and mid-level command have been dismantled or killed. But they still believe they're winning because that's jihad. Jihad is a never-ending long war that will continue until the last man is wiped out. And that is why, in that spirit, the regime wanted immediately to name from the Assembly of Experts in Qom the next religious leader. But the United States and Israel are not playing that game. They understand it, and they're going to keep eliminating from the top of the pyramid any future leadership on the IRGC and the religious leadership until everyone is gone. But President Trump, it was serious when he said we're going to finish the job. We're going to go to handle it's the regime that's the problem. It's not only their ballistic missile capabilities, which largely have been wiped out. I mean, more than 80% of the missile launchers have been wiped out. They have fewer than 100 left. They started with 450. That's just an indication of the massive military might of the United States, as well as its partner in Israel. And this has come, after 47 years of mass murder, torture, and subversion. Let's remind the American people that thousands of American servicemen and women, several thousand, have been killed by the Iranian regime since 9/11, which they collaborated on. They cooperated with Al Qaeda, and I will say this: I don't think it's been said before, but the suspected terror attack that took place in Gracie Mansion by 2 adherents to ISIS, believe me, they are motivated by what they see in the Iranian regime, and this is one of the most important. In addition to the terror attack that took place in Austin, Texas, in which the suspect was bearing an Iranian regime flag and made reference to the Iranian regime. This is the type of incitement to international murder and terror that this regime has played a central part in fomenting, and why they must be and they are in the midst of being dismantled. And it's vitally important that this regime ends its 47-year rule of messianically driven, religiously driven terror against Americans throughout American military bases in the Middle East, against Israel, and against America itself from Latin America.
And Dan, I want to get your view as we pan back a little bit. Trump rebuked the UK in terms of their offer to make bases available, saying it would have been nice to have had them 2 weeks ago when the campaign started. Yet NATO did shoot down now a second missile that crossed into Turkey from Iran. Many of the Gulf countries have neutralized Iranian missiles but have not come in on the offensive. Do you expect any other countries to join Israel and the U.S.?
That's an excellent question. And in fact, it was reported just a few hours ago that President Trump condemned or heavily criticized his Arab Gulf partners for not taking a far more offensive position in this war. And one of the reasons is, Carrie, is that this is jihad, and the whole Arab Muslim establishment, even the more moderate states like Saudi Arabia, are under massive pressure by the Muslim street not to participate directly, specifically because Israel's involved, and they have, fashioned very negative. They, for decades, been very much adversaries of any Jewish sovereign presence in what they consider the Arab Muslim majority Middle East. And President Trump is not having any of it. President Trump's compliment of Israel is that Israel is a country that knows how to defend itself, and he has leveled criticism both on Europe and on his Arab partners in the Middle East, because he says they have to do a lot better at carrying their own weight from a military defense and offense point of view, and they haven't yet stepped up to the plate. That's what he meant when he criticized Prime Minister Starmer. The Brits have been all too hesitant. Well, let's bear in mind, the Iranian regime has attempted to assassinate scores of Brits in the last 2.5 years alone. But having been in the House of Commons myself with members of the Iranian opposition, I've heard officials from the UK say they prefer to maintain diplomatic relations with the Iranian regime as opposed to taking offensive positions against them. Go and figure. But I will say that President Trump has set a new standard for strategic clarity for the Western alliance that will serve as an example for years to come.
Well, we appreciate your insights this morning. Dr. Dan Diker from Jerusalem, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Carrie. Good to see you again.
While New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani and his police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, say they're treating a Saturday incident involving explosive devices as an act of ISIS-inspired terrorism. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
New York City will never tolerate violence.
And then tell everyone else.
An attack outside the New York City mayor's residence is being treated as an act of terrorism.
I can confirm this morning that this is being investigated as an act of ISIS-inspired terrorism.
The alleged act of terrorism happened Saturday during an anti-Islam protest.
There is video of these two individuals throwing two devices towards the protest. The police department has determined that these were improvised explosive devices made to injure, maim, or worse.
Amir Balat and Ibrahim Qayyumi, the two suspects in custody, allegedly traveled from Pennsylvania to the protest in New York. The devices that were tossed into the crowd were packed with nuts, bolts, and screws and contained a chemical substance inside a taped canister fitted with a fuse.
Preliminary test results determined that these were not hoax devices nor smoke bombs.
The FBI has joined the New York Police Department in testing the devices as well as in conducting a terrorism investigation. Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch said the suspects will be prosecuted in federal court in Manhattan.
The complaint will set forth criminal charges and the factual allegations supporting those charges.
In a second press conference on Monday afternoon, Tisch released more information on federal charges against the suspects.
The defendants are charged with attempting to provide material support to ISIS, using a weapon of mass destruction, transporting explosive materials, interstate transportation and receipt of explosive materials, and unlawful possession of destructive devices.
Balat and Qayyumi are both under age 21. They have no prior criminal records. On their first appearance in federal court Monday, their attorneys requested protective custody for their clients. Tisch said they each admitted they were inspired by ISIS.
As Qayyumi was being placed into an NYPD vehicle following his arrest, a person in the crowd asked why he had done this. As shown on NYPD body-worn camera footage referenced in the complaint, Qayyumi responded with ISIS.
She said Balat also made unsolicited statements that were captured on body cam footage.
She said, "This isn't a religion that just stands when people talk about the blessed name of the prophet. We take action, we take action."
She said he also told investigators that he hoped to carry out an attack even bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing, which occurred 13 years ago. That bombing killed 3 individuals. NYPD officers put their own lives at risk on Saturday to stop one bomb from detonating. They later found 2 more. The police commissioner, a U.S. attorney, and an assistant FBI director all praised the officers for their heroic actions and for keeping New Yorkers safe. Tisch said these agencies are working together with NYPD in an ongoing investigation. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And continuing with our Iran coverage, President Trump ahead warning Iran over the Strait of Hormuz.
And Trump says if Iran continues to interfere with shipping, the U.S. will strike even harder.
And as global markets shift, we'll talk about the economy, investments, and managing your money with Rod Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital. Welcome back. The Iran war is having a major effect on the world's supply of oil.
Yeah, President Trump is warning Iran not to block oil shipments that will pass through the Strait of Hormuz or risk being struck even harder. Here's more on that.
President Trump is warning Iran not to interfere with global oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz as the Iran war continues. Trump telling the press yesterday the U.S. will respond forcefully if Tehran tries to block the key shipping route.
And I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply. And if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level.
Trump later saying on Truth Social, the U.S. will hit Iran 20 times harder than they have so far. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important choke points in the world. Located between Iran and Oman, the narrow waterway connects major Gulf oil producers to global markets. About a fifth of the world's total oil passes through the strait. The conflict has already disrupted shipping traffic and driven energy prices higher. Following Trump's comments that the war would end soon, oil prices plunging as much as 10% today. The Trump administration is also taking steps to stabilize energy markets, the president saying he plans to lift sanctions on some countries.
We're also waiving certain oil-related sanctions to reduce prices. So we have sanctions on some countries. We're going to take those sanctions off till this straightens out.
He also said the U.S. could protect ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz.
But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait if needed. I hope it's not going to be needed, but if it's needed, we'll escort them right through.
Trump also says the United States is increasing oil cooperation with Venezuela.
The relationship is extraordinary with Venezuela, smart country. We've taken out 100 million barrels of oil. It's right now in Houston being taken care of and made so beautiful.
He also says an additional 100 million barrels are on the way to refineries in the U.S.
And joining us now to help navigate the shifts in energy markets and your investments is Rod D. Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital. Good morning, Rod. What do you see as the most immediate economic pain points for American families and businesses at this point in time?
Well, obviously, everybody's very concerned about oil prices. The drop in the last 24 hours is telling, though. The truth is, there's really no lack of supply. We've got tons of supply in the global market, and the U.S. supply is almost entirely unaffected by this. Nearly all of our oil comes from the United States or Canada, some from Venezuela, a little bit from other places. California is an exception because they've made it incredibly hard to produce energy in their state, so they import quite a bit. But for most of the country, this is fear-driven. The price increases are driven by the concern on the part of markets that somehow Iran is going to close the Strait of Hormuz, which seems virtually impossible, considering that we've basically sunk their navy and have complete air dominance over the country, but also by the insurance angle. And we saw that last week when Lloyd's of London, which underwrites most maritime shipping in the world, just abruptly hiked prices and then started canceling contracts. And the president acted aggressively on that and started offering maritime insurance through the United States Development Finance Corporation. That is, as much as anything, a shot across Keir Starmer's bow. If you're going to betray us on Diego Garcia and on all these other things that have come up in the last few weeks, there's a price to be paid for the city of London. But the long and the short of it is, it's a solvable problem. It's a short-term problem. and people really don't need to be overly concerned about it.
So if it is mostly fear-based, what will it take to turn the heat down then?
Well, the president did a great job with that last night. I think his remarks clearly had an impact on the markets. A 10% drop is not insignificant. The bigger issue is the underlying insurance problem. If the Development Finance Corporation can actually step in and replace in whole or in part Lloyd's function underwriting maritime shipping, it's a game changer. It's also a huge shift of economic power from London to the United States, and something Keir Starmer needs to take extremely seriously. But at the end of the day, the insurance policy on global shipping in all parts of the world whatsoever is and always has been in modern times the United States Navy. And that's what the president was saying last night. We're not going to let your oil tanker get blown up in the Strait of Hormuz or captured by the Iranians. We're going to escort these ships with the full firepower and missile defense systems that we have deployed throughout the U.S. Navy.
And President Trump is very optimistic about the outcome here in Iran. If that does eventuate and we either soon or later see a decisive victory leading to a freer Iran, how will that ultimately stabilize or lower energy prices in the long run, if indeed it is fear-based at this point in time?
Oh my goodness, utopia just breaks out. I mean, I'm being a little silly, but not that much. Iran is a vast and beautiful country, 90 million people, shocking talent, highly educated population, tremendously entrepreneurial people. You see that in Los Angeles. You see that in Toronto, where so many people came after the revolution and have contributed so much to our countries here in North America. But the untapped resources are extraordinary. And the reason for that is that Iran is a theocracy in ideology, but it's a socialist system in practice. And socialism kills everything it touches. It kills the goose that laid the golden egg because it actually starts carving it up and handing it out to different people who are friends of the regime. And we saw that in Venezuela too. So a free Iran means a first world country within 15 to 20 years that is free, it's democratic, and it isn't stoking conflict all over the Middle East. That'll bring the risk premium down a lot. Every current conflict you can point to in the Middle East is fueled, armed, and funded by the Iranian regime. You take that out of the picture and peace breaks out. This is actually the keystone of the president's plan. He really wants Middle East peace. This is really a way to get it, and that lets us draw down forces and move them into the Indo-Pacific.
And just on the micro scale, back to today, for people who are dealing with or eyeing potential rises in prices, how would you suggest they manage just for the time being?
Yeah, for the time being, I don't think you're going to see huge spikes in gasoline prices. They're down on average $2 a gallon from when Biden was still president. It's a little tough for the short term. It is just for the short term. You know, maybe take a few less short-term trips, maybe burn a little less gasoline. But in general, you're not going to have a huge problem. The president means to wrap this conflict up as quickly as possible. It's not going to be a 20-year forever war a la George Bush and Barack Obama. It's just not. And so the disruption is going to be brief, and I don't think anybody's going to have to worry about it too much. In fact, we would predict here that you're going to see an average oil price of about $80 a barrel over the next 3 months, you know, maybe as low as 70. That's actually a net decrease over the beginning of the war.
All right. Well, it's great to hear your insights this morning. Rod Martin, thank you again.
Thank you.
And President Trump says he had a very good call with Russia's President Putin. The pair talked about the Ukraine conflict as well as the Middle East.
Look, there's tremendous hatred between President Putin and President Zelensky. They can't seem to get it together. But I think it was a positive call on that subject. And we obviously talked then about the Middle East. And he wants to be helpful. I said, you could be more helpful by getting the Ukraine-Russia war over with. That would be more helpful. But we had a very good talk, and he wants to be very constructive. Yeah, please.
Both Trump and the Kremlin described yesterday's hour-long call as constructive. The Kremlin adding that Putin presented several ideas for a quick political and diplomatic resolution to the Iran war. Putin cited recent contacts with Gulf state leaders and Iran's president. The Kremlin says the two leaders also discussed the war in Ukraine, with Putin telling Trump that Russian forces were advancing and suggested Kiev should move toward negotiations. Kremlin also saying that Trump expressed support for ending the war with a ceasefire and a long-term settlement. Russia says the leaders also briefly discussed Venezuela and global oil markets, and they agreed to maintain regular communication.
Australia has granted humanitarian visas to 5 female Iranian soccer players seeking asylum.
The women coming into the spotlight after refusing to sing their own country's anthem.
Last night, we issued 5 humanitarian visas to members of the Iranian women's soccer team. We've been preparing for this for some time.
I say to the other members of the team, the same opportunity is there. Australia has taken the Iranian women's soccer team into our hearts. These women are tremendously popular in Australia, but we realise they are in a terribly difficult situation with the decisions that they're making.
The Iranian women's team were in Australia for the Asia Cup. They sought asylum, fearing persecution on their return home for refusing to sing their national anthem at the match. Australian Home Minister Tony Burke said today the government had been in secret talks with the players and said fleeing was a difficult decision for them.
Australian police say the women were transported to an undisclosed safe location. President Trump reacted to the news, saying on Truth Social, Australia's Prime Minister was doing a very good job with a delicate situation.
And coming up, more severe weather in store for the South and Midwest.
It comes as Michigan and Oklahoma are recovering from devastating tornadoes.
Meanwhile, TSA employees have almost gone a month without pay now, with long security checkpoint lines beginning to form at many major airports. We'll have that and more.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here's some of today's top headlines. President Trump says U.S. strikes have destroyed 80% of Iran's missile sites, and it's crippled its drone and naval forces. A new video from Central Command shows missile launchers being targeted. Trump stressed the strikes were needed to protect U.S. allies. The president declined to say whether Iran's newly appointed leader is a target, calling any comment inappropriate. And President Trump is warning Iran not to block oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump says if Tehran interferes with the key shipping route, that the U.S. will respond with much stronger force. Oil prices falling today after Trump suggested the war could end soon. Trump says the U.S. may lift some oil-related sanctions to stabilize the markets. And an attack outside the New York City mayor's residence is being treated as an act of terrorism. The FBI has joined the investigation into what the NYPD is calling an ISIS-inspired act. The incident happened on Saturday during a protest when 2 suspects tossed a homemade explosive into the crowd. Fortunately, the device did not detonate. Officials say the suspects are being charged with attempting to provide material support to ISIS, using a weapon of mass destruction, and several others charges related to the explosives. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Steph, over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. And the Trump administration has designated Afghanistan as a state sponsor of wrongful detention. It comes amid concerns that Americans are being detained there to gain concessions. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the Taliban is using kidnapping as a tactic. Rubio says Americans should not travel to Afghanistan due to the risk of a detention. Secretary calling on the Taliban to release Americans believed to be held in the country. Afghanistan joins Iran on a list of countries singled out by the U.S. in the past 2 weeks for detaining Americans in hopes of extracting policy concessions. And a group of Senate Democrats is threatening to shut down Senate business.
They're demanding that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and other senior officials testify on the Iran war.
Senators, including Cory Booker, Chris Murphy, and Tammy Duckworth, say hearings are needed to answer questions on the war's cost, duration, rules of engagement, and civilian casualties. Democrats plan to force repeated votes on resolutions to halt U.S. military action using the War Powers Act.
Senate Republicans are pushing back, however. Senator Katie Britt, she criticized Democrats for playing, quote, political games amid the ongoing DHS shutdown. Britt cited growing airport delays and unpaid staff. Britt called on Democrats to stop blocking negotiations and to focus on national security. Meanwhile, President Trump says the shutdown is slowing down agencies that track threats, like whether Iran has activated sleeper cells in the country.
And the Senate Armed Services Committee will hold a closed briefing this morning.
They're going to discuss Operation Epic Fury, the U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran.
Some passengers have been waiting as long as 3 hours to get through security at some airports. Meanwhile, New Orleans Airport and several others are saying it's due to TSA staffing shortages.
Now, a partial government shutdown has been in effect for nearly a month now, and the White House says thousands of government workers, including TSA employees, aren't getting paid. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more on that.
Long security checkpoint lines have been spotted at many major airports around the country. This includes Houston, New Orleans, and Atlanta. One line can be seen stretching outside of the terminal and one into an airport parking garage. New Orleans International Airport posted a notice on Monday announcing delays due to the partial government shutdown, saying passengers are advised to arrive at least 3 hours before their scheduled departure to allow plenty of time to undergo security screening. Wait times could be up to 2 hours, and the delays could continue through the rest of the week. And Atlanta Airport also posted that it's experiencing, quote, extended wait times at TSA security checkpoints. A partial government shutdown has been ongoing. Many employees at the Department of Homeland Security have been working without pay, and this includes TSA employees. Last month, the TSA administrator told Congress that absences are common during shutdowns.
Which means folks calling out because they could not afford to show up to work. And what we have to do in those instances is to start kind of consolidating and collapsing some of our operations, which means that not all of our lanes are open, and that does lead to longer wait times.
In order to get the DHS running at full capacity again, both the House and Senate need to reach a funding agreement. The White House announcing on Monday that over 100,000 workers are going without pay during the partial government shutdown. The statement says now, as TSA workers work without paychecks for the third time in nearly 6 months, crippling staffing shortages and hours-long security lines are gripping airports as millions of families head out for spring break. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thank you, Jason. And the Federal Aviation Administration canceling a briefly issued ground stop this morning for all JetBlue flights. This is after the airline said it resolved a system outage and resumed normal operations, according to a JetBlue spokesperson. The FAA said the flight halt was issued at the request of JetBlue. JetBlue is headquartered in New York and flies to more than 110 destinations across the U.S., Canada, Europe, and the Caribbean. Now on to the weather. Severe storms are expected across several parts of the country over the next few days.
According to forecasts, the Midwest and the South, they could all experience damaging winds, flooding, and possible tornadoes.
In Michigan, a powerful tornado devastated the town of Union City just last week. 3 people were killed and 12 injured. Separately, a 12-year-old boy was killed in Cass County.
In Oklahoma, a mother and daughter perished after a series of tornadoes.
Now, millions of people, some in the same areas, are again bracing for severe weather. Oh, such tragedy. Well, coming up, President Trump is ramping up pressure to enforce voter ID, vowing to stall any bills from becoming law until it's approved by Congress.
And Georgia's 14th district heads to the polls to choose Marjorie Taylor Greene's replacement. Who is leading the crowded field in the special election? Which could have a big impact on the balance of power in Congress. Stay with us for that.
Welcome back. Later this morning, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth will be joined by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to give an update on the operation in Iran.
We're going to have that live for you here on NTD, so be sure to stick around for that.
And President Trump is ramping up pressure on congressional Republicans to approve changes to voter ID requirements. He vowed to stop signing other bills into law until it's done. Senate Leader John Thune is unclear how to move the bill forward amid the opposition. NTD's Melina Weisskopf joins us to break it down. Melina, good morning. What can you tell us about this push for voter ID?
Hey, good morning, Steph. So the Save America Act would require proof of citizenship to register to vote and a photo ID when voting in person. It's an issue that Republicans have repeatedly said is popular among voters from both sides of the aisle. Here's how House Speaker Mike Johnson described it when it passed the House.
This is about a 90-10 issue in the polling, because all that we've done tonight in this simple piece of legislation is apply common sense. All this Save America Act does is it enhances the SAVE Act, which you've already passed twice before, which says that you have to have proof of citizenship before you register to vote in federal elections.
Now, President Trump insisted that this is the top priority for him and it should be for lawmakers, since he says he's certain if it's passed, it would secure the midterms for Republicans. Now, the president at the Issues Conference just yesterday doubled down on a previous vow to not approve any other bills until this becomes law. Here's Trump.
Let's go for the gold. And let's just not accept anything else. I'll tell you what, I'm willing to just sort of say I'm not going to sign anything until this is approved. I really am, but that's how bad it is. If you don't get it, big trouble, my opinion. If you get this, your midterms, and they know it. For two reasons. Number one, they won't be able to cheat. And number two, the people are demanding it.
And Steph, he wants to pass this with a couple of other issues, a measure that would make it illegal for men to join women's sports. He wants to add that onto this agenda, as well as a measure to stop what he described as transgender mutilation surgery for children. Steph?
So, Melina, the Save America Act already passed the House a month ago, but it's been stalled in the Senate for quite some time. What's the holdup, and is there a path forward?
Well, theoretically, there is a path forward despite the Democrat opposition, which has so far what caused the bill to stall in the Senate. But it could get tricky because it would force senators to use the floor in a way that they don't usually conduct business. It would either require senators to nuke the 60-vote filibuster, which is what requires Democrat support for most legislation in the current makeup of the Senate. But this is unlikely to get the Republican support needed, and that's why Senate Majority Leader John Thune said this is simply not an option. Here's Thune.
There aren't anywhere close to the votes, not even close, to nuking the filibuster. And so that idea is something, although it continues to be put out there, is something that doesn't have a future. So is there another way of getting there? We'll see.
But there is another way to do this that's been pushed by President Trump as well as several senators. Senator Mike Lee is actually the leading force here. He's pushing for something called a talking filibuster. That would look like unlimited floor debate instead of the usual 30-hour debate window that's provided for most legislation. So it would require Democrats to hold the floor for as long as it takes for debate to wind down before a vote. If Republicans are able to outlast Democrats with that floor debate, they would be able to pass this with a simple majority without any Democrat support. This idea has gotten a lot of steam online, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune just yesterday dismissed the online push as a product of a paid influencer ecosystem. Senator Mike Lee last night pushed back on that idea.
Over the last few months, tens of millions of Americans have jumped on the cause of supporting the Save America Act and using the talking filibuster to advance it. I regret that some in Washington tonight are dismissing all those who feel this way and who have weighed in as somehow paid influencers or the product of paid influencers. This is wrong.
Senate Leader John Thune insists that the result of a talking filibuster would be unclear, but he says he's still working with the conference on how to move forward here. Steph?
All right, Melina Weisskopf, thank you so much for the update.
Yeah, it seems like getting the TSA opening at the airport's very much something that all people want to see, but also voter ID seems like something that Trump's not going to relent on. So we'll have to see what happens.
We sure will. And as House Republicans begin their annual policy retreat in Florida, one of their biggest questions is, will the GOP push a second reconciliation bill?
NTD's Chris Bobb has more on that.
To develop this policy framework that would address affordability in health care, to housing, to electricity, and gas prices.
House Republicans are convening in Doral, Florida this week for their annual policy retreat. With a razor-thin margin and looming midterm elections, party leaders are weighing their next move, a potential second reconciliation bill aimed at affordability and codifying President Trump's agenda. The idea, nicknamed Reconciliation 2.0, was first outlined by conservatives earlier this year as a way to target rising costs for American families.
Right here is the framework for what we're calling the Make American Dream Affordable Again, Reconciliation 2.0 plan.
An earlier framework released by the Republican Study Committee proposes a range of policies, including reforms to health care programs and energy regulations. There are also incentives for first-time homebuyers.
If you talk to anyone under the age of 40, they will tell you it is virtually impossible. You can't get in to even tour a home before it's snapped up by someone else, probably a little bit older, or a corporation that's buying in cash. So today, we are including the Nest Act. First-time homebuyers would be allowed to save for their down payment tax-free.
Republican leaders say putting these items in a reconciliation bill could allow them to pass legislation in the Senate with a simple majority, bypassing the 60-vote threshold required for most bills.
As you know, that's the only way to get around the necessary threshold of 60 votes in the Senate. So we're working right now very methodically, carefully to determine what of our priorities we can squeeze into a second reconciliation bill.
The GOP retreat continues through Wednesday. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Chris Bobb, NTD News.
Thank you, Chris. And voters in Georgia's 14th congressional district are heading to the polls today to choose a replacement for Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Now, the race could affect the balance of power in the House of Representatives.
A large field of candidates is competing in the special election, down from 22 to 17. All candidates appearing on the same ballot regardless of party affiliation.
And among the leading Republican contenders is State District Attorney Clay Fuller. He's endorsed by President Trump.
Among the Democrats is retired Army Brigadier General Sean Harris, who ran against Greene in 2024.
Now, if no candidate should win a majority, then the top two finishers will advance to another vote, which will happen next month. Greene resigned from her seat in January following a very public fallout with President Trump.
And as America looks ahead to its 250th birthday, officials in Washington, D.C. unveil a special race course for the first ever Indycar Freedom 250 Grand Prix racing event.
That should be a gas, I would expect. Now, the event will be on August 23rd, and it's going to feature 1.7 miles of track and 7 turns around those iconic landmarks in D.C.
When we think about America's 250 years, it's really hard to think about anything that's more American than cars. It's long been said Americans have always had a love affair with their cars, and this has been the center of innovation in a major industry. But now, for the first time, that story is going to be written right here on a route that includes 3 of the most famous avenues in America. Think of it. Cars racing at speeds close to 200 miles an hour down Pennsylvania Avenue, Constitution Avenue, and Independence Avenue. This is a free, nobody's ever probably got a chance in their lifetime before to go to a race of this caliber and attend for free. And we expect that there could be 1 million+ people that are going to be here over those multiple days of racing. There's going to be giant screens set up and down the mall. It's going to be a fantastic family event.
And I'm looking forward to it. 190 miles an hour. Last time we did this, 1801, we had horses race in the Capitol. Next time we do it, we're doing 190, 185, whatever miles an hour, starting right behind us. We're going to start a race in the Capitol. Right behind us is going to be so cool. So I'm looking forward to it. God bless. Freedom Revs.
As Secretary Burgum said, the event is free to the public, and this could be a chance for you to witness the mix of motorsports and patriotic celebrations.
Now, the IndyCar race is taking place after President Trump signed an executive order in January. The president also plans to host an Ultimate Fighting Championship match at the White House in July. Looks like there's a lot to look forward to with America 250.
Sure is. Sounds like a great time.
Well, look, if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's a story you'd like to see us cover, maybe a couple different angles on America 250, let us know. Send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
I'm Carrie Dunst. We'll see you soon.